I've been reporting on the situation regularly in extensive reports to the Human Rights Council, 3 of them. I'll be reporting again soon to the General Assembly. And I have been, providing an overview of a pretty grim situation for human rights in Afghanistan since I took up my mandate on the 1st of May last year. But actually, since the fall of the Republic on the 15th of August 21, just about 2 years ago. And perhaps most particularly, the rights of women and girls have been systematically deprived. And in no other country, for example, are girls banned from education beyond primary school level. In Afghanistan, they're banned at secondary school and also at university. This is the only country in the world. And while the Taliban defend it in terms of Sharia, and they're a little unclear about how long this will last, they say it's temporary, we haven't seen much progress on that. But there are also many other widespread human rights violations, not only with women and girls, but with other sectors of the population, with ethnic and religious minorities, other types of minorities, with civic space. Civil society is finding it very difficult to operate, and especially human rights defenders. Journalists, similarly, there is a clampdown on freedom of expression. And the members of the previous, the Republic's security forces are also under a lot of pressure, with many reports of them, of disappearances, of arbitrary arrest and detention, torture, killing, despite the announcement of a general amnesty by the Taliban. We also see many Afghans fleeing the country, and we see that there is almost no tolerance for dissent or even differences of opinion. There is complete lack of inclusiveness, gender inclusiveness, and other forms of inclusiveness in the de facto authority, the Taliban authority governance, and the lack of rule of law. So I could go on, but I don't want to go on for too long. In terms of key challenges, I would say that the first challenge is to stop the violations and the suffering of the Afghan people, and to create accountability for the perpetrators and remedies for the victims and survivors. And this should include documenting their experiences, providing compensation and reparations, but also reversing the policies and practices that are from which they're currently suffering. And I continue to require Afghanistan to meet its international human rights obligations, which continue despite any change of government, and to reverse the pattern of serious violations. You also asked me about improvements. It's in human rights work, it's always hard to know how much worse the situation might have been, but for the documentation and advocacy that we're doing. In Afghanistan at present, the Taliban interpret human rights in the context of their version of Sharia. And I emphasize their version. And this is not in line with international human rights standards. They themselves consider that they've made improvements in security, in anti-corruption, and in clamping down on narcotics, for example, and they want credit for this. But even if this is true, it cannot be a substitute for the denial of fundamental rights that we are continuing to see. We want to see the violations stop, and we want to see a reversal of policies that lead to the violations, including policies affecting women and girls, but also a more participatory and inclusive approach. I don't want to go through and prioritize too much because there are so many things that need to be changed. But I think we do want to see girls back in school and women back at work. And we want to see things like better treatment of detainees and the possibility of independent monitoring and much more civic space for civil society and human rights defenders, and the restoration of the rule of law and the institutions that are necessary for the rule of law, many of which have been dissolved. And I'm talking about institutions like a parliament, an independent and professional judiciary, a human rights commission, and so on. And in this regard, the role of other Muslim majority countries is significant. And I would look to them for leadership. In many of the policies of the Taliban de facto authorities are not accepted by Muslim majority countries and by the OIC, the Organization Islamic Conference. So I would hope that there is leadership from within the Muslim community, because the Taliban declare that they're an Islamic state. And yet many disagree with how they are framing and creating this state. And the most valuable voices should come from Muslims themselves, including scholars in that community.